The year was 2347, and humanity had stretched its reach far beyond Earth. Colonies dotted distant star systems, trade routes crisscrossed the galaxy, and peace, fragile as it was, held steady. But on a quiet day near the edge of known space, everything changed. Captain Elira Voss leaned back in her command chair aboard the Eclipse, a sleek scout vessel tasked with patrolling uncharted regions. Her crew of 6 moved efficiently around her, monitoring sensors and running routine checks. It was supposed to be an ordinary mission, scanning for resources, mapping nebulae, and keeping an eye out for anything unusual. And then they found it. "Captain," called Ensign Dax, his voice trembling slightly. He pointed at the main view screen, where something massive loomed against the endless blackness of space. At first glance, it looked like a shadow, a dark blotch that seemed to swallow the light around it. But as the eclipse drew closer, details emerged, defying logic. The object was enormous, larger than any human warship ever built. Its surface shimmered unnaturally, shifting between metallic silver and deep obsidian. Strange patterns rippled across its hull, not static designs, but fluid shapes that writhed like living things. Most unsettling of all, there was no exhaust trail, no visible engines, nothing to explain how such a colossal structure could exist in the vacuum of space. "What is that?" muttered Lieutenant Rhea Calder, the helmsman, her hands hovering nervously over the controls. "I don't know," Captain Voss replied, her tone calm but firm. She stood up, stepping closer to the screen. "But we're going to find out." The science officer, Dr. Malik, tapped furiously at his console. "Sensors are malfunctioning, Captain. Whatever this thing is, it's interfering with our equipment. No heat signature, no energy readings. It's like it doesn't belong here." "That's impossible," snapped Ensign Dax. "Everything leaves a trace. This isn't natural." As if responding to their disbelief, the object shifted. Not physically, it remained stationary, but its appearance warped. One moment, it resembled a sleek warship. The next, it looked like a jagged asteroid covered in glowing veins. The changes happened too quickly for the human eye to fully process, leaving the crew disoriented. "Something's wrong," whispered Corporal Nyla, clutching the back of her seat. "I feel weird, like my head's buzzing." Voss noticed it too, a faint hum resonating through the ship, almost imperceptible but growing louder by the second. Then came the whispers. They weren't audible at first, just faint murmurs in the background. But soon, they grew clearer, though no one spoke them aloud. "Destroy. Consume. Survive." "Is anyone else hearing that?" asked Rhea, her voice tight with fear. "It's coming from outside," said Dr. Malik, adjusting his headset. "Some kind of signal, or maybe interference." Before anyone could respond, the object surged forward. There was no blast of propulsion, no fiery thrusters, just sudden, impossible movement. In the blink of an eye, it positioned itself directly between the Eclipse and Earth, blocking their path home. "Captain, we need to leave," shouted Ensign Dax, panic creeping into his voice. "We can't fight that thing." Voss clenched her fists, her mind racing. Leaving felt like the smart choice, but curiosity burned inside her. What was this thing? Where did it come from? And why did it feel so alive? "No," she said finally, her voice steady despite the unease gripping her chest. "We stay. We investigate. Whatever this is, it's not leaving us alone. And neither are we." As the crew prepared to approach the mysterious object, none of them realized the danger lurking ahead. This wasn't just a ship. It wasn't just technology. It was something far older, far deadlier. And it had been waiting for them. The Eclipse hovered cautiously near the monstrous warship, its crew tense and silent. Captain Elira Voss stood at the center of the bridge, her sharp eyes scanning every detail on the view screen. The object loomed larger than ever, its surface now pulsing faintly with an eerie glow. It felt alive, watching them, waiting. "We're not getting anything useful from the sensors," muttered Dr. Malik. Frustration etched across his face as he adjusted dials and tapped furiously at his console. "It's like it doesn't exist in our reality." "Maybe it doesn't," whispered Corporal Nyla, half to herself. She glanced nervously at the screen, rubbing her arms as if trying to ward off a chill. What if this thing came from somewhere else? Another dimension. "Stay focused," snapped Voss, though she couldn't deny the unease creeping into her own thoughts. "Let's try communicating. Send out a standard greeting, every frequency we've got." Ensign Dax nodded quickly, his fingers flying over the communication panel. A series of signals, radio waves, light pulses, even quantum-encoded messages, shot toward the warship. For several agonizing minutes, there was only silence. And then, something happened. "It's responding," exclaimed Dax, his voice rising with excitement and fear. But what came back wasn't words or images, it was sound. Harsh, discordant tones filled the ship, reverberating through the walls and rattling the crew's nerves. Then, just as suddenly, the noise stopped. In its place came visions, directly imprinted into their minds. Captain Voss staggered, clutching her head as flashes of destruction flooded her consciousness. Cities crumbling under fiery skies, stars collapsing into black holes. Entire civilizations wiped out in seconds. She gasped for air, shaking her head to clear the images, but they lingered, burned into her memory. "What was that?" stammered Lieutenant Rhea Calder, gripping the edge of her console for support. Her knuckles were white, and sweat beaded on her forehead. "I don't know," said Dr. Malik, his voice trembling. But it wasn't just random static. Those were memories, or warnings, from whoever built this thing. Before anyone could recover, the warship moved again. This time, it didn't just shift positions. It surged forward with impossible speed, stopping mere kilometers away from the eclipse. The sheer proximity made the scout vessel shudder violently, alarms blaring as gravitational forces fluctuated wildly. "Shields are failing," shouted Ensign Dax, frantically working to stabilize the systems. "We can't hold up against whatever it's doing." "Everyone, brace yourselves," ordered Voss, gripping the railing beside her chair. Despite her calm exterior, her heart pounded in her chest. Whatever this thing was, it wasn't friendly, and it clearly wanted their attention. Then, without warning, the warship emitted a brilliant burst of light. It wasn't a weapon. It seemed more like a signal. Patterns danced across the hull, forming intricate symbols that pulsed rhythmically. The crew stared in awe, unsure whether to interpret it as a message or a threat. "What does it want?" whispered Nyla, her voice barely audible over the hum filling the ship. Voss hesitated, weighing their options. They couldn't fight this thing, not with their limited resources, and running wouldn't solve anything. If this warship truly posed a threat to humanity, they needed answers. "Prepare a drone," she commanded finally. "We'll send it in for a closer look." "But Captain," began Rhea, her tone laced with concern. "No arguments," Voss cut her off sharply. "We have no choice. If we leave now, we risk letting this thing get closer to Earth. We have to understand what we're dealing with." Minutes later, the small reconnaissance drone launched from the eclipse, drifting cautiously toward the warship. The crew watched anxiously as it approached the shimmering hull, and then vanished. One moment, it was there. The next, it was gone. No explosion, no debris, just nothing. "Where did it go?" demanded Dax, checking readings that showed absolutely no trace of the drone. "I don't know," admitted Dr. Malik, his voice hollow. "But I think we just learned one thing for certain. This isn't just some abandoned relic. It's active, and it's dangerous." As the warship remained ominously still outside, blocking their path home, the crew exchanged uneasy glances. Panic simmered beneath the surface, threatening to boil over. None of them knew what would happen next, but one thing was clear. Escape might not be an option anymore. The disappearance of the drone left the crew of the Eclipse shaken. Captain Elira Voss clenched her jaw, staring at the empty space on the view screen where the warship loomed silently. Whatever this thing was, it wasn't just a passive relic. It was alive, aware, and far beyond their comprehension. "We can't sit here waiting for it to make the next move," she said finally, breaking the tense silence. "We need to board it." Her words were met with stunned looks from her crew. Lieutenant Rhea Calder spoke first, her voice tight with unease. "Captain, are you sure about that? We don't even know what happened to the drone, or if we'll come back in one piece." "I'm not asking for volunteers," Voss replied sharply, though her tone softened slightly as she added, "But yes, I'm sure. Sitting here won't get us answers. If this thing is as dangerous as it seems, we need to figure out how it works and how to stop it." After a brief debate, a small team was assembled. Captain Voss herself, Dr. Malik, Ensign Dax, and Corporal Nyla, armed with scanners, tools, and emergency supplies, they prepared to leave the safety of the Eclipse. As they suited up, no one spoke much. The weight of what they were about to do hung heavily over them. When the airlock hissed open and they stepped onto the surface of the warship, reality seemed to warp around them. Gravity fluctuated unpredictably, sometimes pulling them down hard, other times making them float as though weightless. The ship's surface shimmered like liquid metal, rippling under their boots as if alive. Every step felt uncertain, every movement unnatural. "This place, it's wrong," muttered Nyla, her voice muffled through her helmet. She glanced nervously at the shifting walls that surrounded them. They weren't solid steel or alloy. They looked more like organic tissue fused with machinery, veins of glowing energy pulsing beneath the surface. "Stay close," ordered Voss, gripping her scanner tightly, "and keep your eyes open." As they ventured deeper into the warship, the environment grew stranger. Time itself seemed distorted. One moment, seconds stretched into minutes. The next, hours passed in the blink of an eye. Lights flickered erratically, casting eerie shadows that danced across the walls. The hum they'd heard earlier returned, louder now, vibrating through their suits and rattling their bones. Dr. Malik stopped suddenly, pointing his scanner at a nearby wall. "Look at this," he exclaimed. Embedded within the shifting material were fragments of alien technology, devices unlike anything humanity had ever seen. Some resembled circuit boards, while others looked like crystalline structures grown rather than built. But most unsettling of all were the patches of flesh-like material, pulsating faintly with life. "It's part machine, part organism," Malik whispered, his voice filled with awe and dread. "This isn't just a ship, it's something else entirely." They pressed onward, drawn by faint readings emanating from what appeared to be a central chamber. Inside, they found a massive structure resembling a broken egg core. Shards of glowing crystal jutted out from its surface, crackling with unstable energy. Strange symbols floated above it, rotating slowly in midair. Voss approached cautiously, scanning the device. "Could this be the control center?" she asked aloud. Before anyone could answer, the warship reacted violently. The ground beneath them buckled, walls twisted unnaturally, and the air grew thick with static electricity. Warning alarms blared inside their helmets. "It knows we're here," shouted Dax, panic rising in his voice. "We need to get out. Now." "No," snapped Malik, frantically collecting data from the core. "If we leave without understanding this thing, we'll never stop it." But there was no time to argue. Sections of the chamber began collapsing inward, forcing the team to retreat. As they sprinted back toward the airlock, pieces of the ship crumbled around them, narrowly missing them as they ran. By the time they reached the Eclipse, gasping for breath, the warship had already begun repairing itself, sealing off the areas they'd explored. Back aboard their ship, the crew collapsed into their seats, exhausted but alive. They had uncovered fragments of knowledge, but also awakened something far more dangerous. And outside, the warship waited, silent and patient, its intentions still unknown. Back aboard the Eclipse, the crew tried to process what they had seen and survived. The warship's alien core still loomed large in their minds, its glowing shards and cryptic symbols burned into their memories. Captain Elira Voss stood at the center of the bridge, her arms crossed as she stared out at the monstrous vessel through the viewport. It hung there silently, like a predator waiting for its prey to make a mistake. "We need to analyze what we brought back," she said finally, breaking the uneasy silence. "Malik, start going over that data." Dr. Malik nodded, already engrossed in his work. He plugged the scanner into the ship's main computer, pulling up streams of information from the fragments he'd collected. Symbols flickered across the screen, patterns neither human nor machine, yet somehow both. As the crew gathered around to watch, an unsettling realization dawned on them. This wasn't just technology. It was alive, or at least it had been designed by something alive. But before anyone could delve deeper, Corporal Nyla let out a sharp gasp. Everyone turned to see her clutching her head, her face pale and trembling. "What's wrong?" asked Rhea Calder, stepping closer with concern. I don't know," Nyla stammered, her voice shaky. "It's like whispers again. In my head." The room fell silent except for the faint hum of the ship's systems. Then, without warning, Nyla began speaking, not in her own voice, but in a series of guttural sounds, clicks, and tones no human throat should have been able to produce. Her eyes glazed over, unseeing, as if someone, or something, else was controlling her. "Nyla," shouted Voss, moving toward her, but before she could intervene, Nyla stopped mid-sentence and collapsed to the floor, unconscious. "What just happened?" demanded Ensign Dax, his voice rising with panic. "Was that the warship? Did it do something to her?" "It must have infected her when we were inside," muttered Malik, scanning Nyla with his medical tricorder. His expression darkened. "There's something in her brain. Some kind of signal or code. It's rewriting parts of her neural pathways." Voss clenched her fists, torn between anger and fear. "Can you fix it?" "I don't even know where to start," admitted Malik. "This is beyond anything I've ever seen. If we try to remove it, we might kill her, or worse, trigger whatever it's planning." As the crew debated what to do, Nyla stirred, slowly opening her eyes. At first, she seemed disoriented, but then her gaze sharpened, locking onto Voss with unnatural intensity. "You cannot stop it," she said in a voice that wasn't hers, cold, mechanical, and layered with echoes. "Resistance is futile." The word sent chills down everyone's spines. Rhea instinctively reached for her sidearm, but Voss raised a hand to stop her. "Who are you?" Voss demanded, keeping her voice steady despite the dread clawing at her chest. "What do you want?" Nyla, or whatever was speaking through her, tilted her head unnaturally, as though considering the question. "I am the Harbinger, the Reckoning. You are unworthy." Before anyone could respond, Nyla convulsed violently, collapsing again. This time, when she woke, she was herself, confused, frightened, and with no memory of what had just happened. "She's not safe," muttered Dax, backing away slightly. "What if it happens again? What if she turns on us?" "We can't just abandon her," argued Rhea fiercely. "She's one of us. And if she becomes a weapon for that thing out there," countered Dax, gesturing toward the warship outside. "Then what?" Voss stepped forward, silencing the argument with a raised hand. "We isolate her, for now. Malik, keep monitoring her condition. And everyone else, stay alert. If the warship can infect one of us, none of us are truly safe." As they locked Nyla in the med bay under close observation, tensions aboard the Eclipse reached a boiling point. Trust began to fracture among the crew, each member questioning who might be next. Outside, the warship remained ominously still, its presence a constant reminder of the danger lurking within and without. Captain Voss stared out at it, her resolve hardening. They couldn't run, and they couldn't fight. Not yet. But one thing was certain. Humanity's survival depended on unraveling the secrets of this terrifying creation and stopping it before it was too late. Hours passed aboard the Eclipse, each one heavier than the last. The crew worked in tense silence, their movements cautious and deliberate. Corporal Nyla remained locked in the med bay, her condition monitored closely by Dr. Malik. So far, she hadn't shown any further signs of whatever had taken control of her, but the fear lingered like a shadow over everyone. Meanwhile, Captain Elira Voss paced the bridge, her mind racing. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something. Some clue hidden in the data they'd brought back from the warship. Every instinct told her the answers were there. They just needed to dig deeper. "Malik," she said finally, stopping beside his workstation. "Anything new?" The science officer looked up, exhaustion etched into his face. He'd been poring over the scans for hours, his eyes bloodshot from staring at screens filled with alien symbols and patterns. "I think I've found something," he admitted, his voice tinged with both excitement and dread. "There's a signal embedded in this static. Faint, but consistent." "A signal?" asked Lieutenant Rhea Calder, leaning closer. "From the warship?" "No," Malik replied, shaking his head. "It's coming from farther out, beyond the warship. It's a distress call." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Distress calls weren't uncommon in deep space exploration. They often led to discoveries of stranded ships or abandoned colonies. But given their current situation, this felt different. Sinister, even. "Can you translate it?" Voss asked, her tone sharp. "It's not in any human language," Malik explained, adjusting dials and running algorithms. "But the patterns suggest it's artificial, possibly alien. Let me isolate it." For several tense minutes, the only sound was the soft hum of the ship's systems and the occasional click of Malik's tools. Then suddenly, the translation program spat out fragments of text onto the screen. What they read sent chills down their spines. "Warning. Entity designated Harbinger classified as existential threat. Origin unknown. Purpose. Eradication. Do not engage. Repeat. Do not engage." "What does that mean?" whispered Ensign Dax, his voice barely audible. "Is that thing hunting us?" "It's worse than that," Malik muttered, scrolling through more of the fragmented message. "Listen to this. Created by ancients to combat greater threat. System corrupted. Harbinger now targets all life forms indiscriminately." Captain Voss felt a cold knot form in her stomach. So the warship wasn't always hostile. It was made to fight something else, but it turned on its creators. "And now it's targeting us," added Rhea grimly. "We're next." Before anyone could respond, another piece of the message appeared. A series of coordinates accompanied by a single phrase, "Reckoning imminent." Those coordinates, Malik trailed off, cross-referencing them with star charts. His expression darkened further. They lead directly to Earth. Panic rippled through the crew. If the warship was heading toward humanity's homeworld, billions of lives were at stake, and there was no way to warn Earth in time, not with the warship blocking their path. "We have to stop it," Voss declared firmly, though her voice betrayed the weight of the decision. "Whatever it takes." "But how?" demanded Dax, his voice rising. "We're sitting ducks out here. That thing could crush us in an instant." "We'll find a way," Voss shot back, her gaze unwavering. Turning to Malik, she added, "Keep analyzing the signal. There might be more information buried in there, something we can use against it." As Malik nodded and returned to his work, Voss turned her attention back to the viewport. Outside, the warship still hung silently, its shifting surface reflecting faint starlight. It seemed almost peaceful, but they knew better. This wasn't just a machine. It was a weapon, a predator, and it had already marked humanity for destruction. Somewhere deep within the void, the whispers began again, soft, distant, yet unmistakable. They echoed through the comms system, seeping into the minds of the crew. Words formed, unspoken but clear. You cannot escape. Voss clenched her fists, determination hardening her features. Humanity's fate rested on their shoulders. Whether they lived or died, they wouldn't go down without a fight. The crew of the Eclipse huddled in the briefing room, their faces pale and drawn. The weight of what they'd learned pressed down on them like a physical force. The warship, this harbinger, wasn't just an abandoned relic or a random threat. It was a weapon designed to destroy entire civilizations, now turned rogue, and it was heading toward Earth. Captain Elira Voss stood at the head of the table, her expression grim but resolute. She tapped a holographic display showing Earth's location relative to the warship's projected trajectory. "If we don't stop this thing here," she said, her voice steady despite the storm brewing inside her, "it'll reach Earth within weeks, maybe days." "But how?" asked Ensign Dax, his hands trembling as he gripped the edge of the table. "We're one tiny scout ship against something that breaks every law of physics. We can't fight it." "We don't have to fight it," replied Lieutenant Rhea Calder, leaning forward. Her eyes were sharp, determined. "We overload the reactor. Detonate the Eclipse right next to it." The room fell silent. Everyone stared at her, stunned by the suggestion. Even Captain Voss hesitated, weighing the implications. Sacrificing the ship, and themselves, would be suicide. But if it worked, it might disable the Harbinger long enough for humanity to mount a defense. "It's risky," Malik interjected cautiously. "Even with our reactor at full power, there's no guarantee it'll do anything to that thing. What if it just absorbs the energy?" "It's still our best shot," Rhea countered firmly. "And honestly, I don't see another option." Voss nodded slowly, her jaw tightening. "She's right. If we run, we risk leading it straight to Earth. This is our only chance. But someone will need to stay behind," Rhea added quietly, meeting Voss's gaze, "to manually trigger the detonation sequence. Otherwise, the blast won't sync properly." This time, the silence was heavier. No one wanted to volunteer for such a mission. Staying behind meant certain death. And worse, facing the Harbinger alone while the others escaped. "I'll do it." All eyes turned to Rhea. She sat up straighter, her voice unwavering. "I'm the helmsman. I know this ship better than anyone. Besides," she paused, glancing briefly at the viewport where the Harbinger loomed ominously. "Earth is my home. My family's there. If I can save them, even at the cost of my life, it's worth it." "Rhea." "No," protested Dax, shaking his head. "There has to be another way." "There isn't," she snapped back, her tone softening as she looked at him. "You all have more to live for than I do. Trust me, I'm not afraid." Captain Voss stepped closer, placing a hand on Rhea's shoulder. "Are you sure about this?" she asked gently, though the answer was already written in Rhea's eyes. "Unsure," Rhea replied without hesitation. "Let's get to work." Preparations began immediately. The crew divided tasks, recalibrating the reactor, programming the detonation sequence, and prepping the escape pods. As they worked, tension crackled in the air. Each member wrestled with guilt, fear, and admiration for Rhea's bravery. They knew she wouldn't survive, but they also knew failure wasn't an option. Meanwhile, outside, the Harbinger remained eerily still, as if sensing their plans. Its surface shimmered faintly, pulsing with a rhythm that matched the whispers echoing through the ship's comm system. As the countdown began, Rhea took her position in the engine room. Alone, she activated the final protocols, her fingers steady despite the knot of dread twisting in her stomach. Through the comm link, she heard Captain Voss's voice one last time. "Thank you, Rhea," Voss said softly, "for everything." "You're welcome, Captain," Rhea replied, managing a small smile. "Now go. Save Earth." One by one, the escape pods launched, carrying the rest of the crew away from the doomed Eclipse. Rhea watched them disappear, then turned her attention to the controls before her. The reactor hummed louder, its energy building to critical levels. On the view screen, the Harbinger stirred, It seemed to sense the impending explosion, drifting closer with unnatural speed. For a moment, Rhea felt a flicker of doubt, but she pushed it aside. Humanity depended on her. Her finger hovered over the final button. Outside, the warship loomed larger than ever, its alien surface rippling like a living thing. Taking a deep breath, she whispered 2 words, "For Earth." And then she pressed the button. The escape pods streaked away from the eclipse, their thrusters burning brightly against the cold void of space. Inside one of them, Captain Elira Voss gripped the armrests of her seat, her knuckles white as she stared out at the doomed scout vessel through a small viewport. The reactor's energy was building rapidly, too rapidly. Lieutenant Rhea Calder's sacrifice would soon reach its devastating conclusion. But something wasn't right. "Captain," Ensign Dax's voice crackled over the comm system, strained and urgent. "The detonation sequence. It's slowing down." Voss froze. "What do you mean, slowing down? That's impossible." "It shouldn't be happening," Malik chimed in, his tone frantic as he analyzed data on his handheld scanner. "Someone tampered with the reactor. Someone sabotaged the overload." Before Voss could respond, another voice cut through the comlink, cold, detached, and chillingly familiar. It was Corporal Nyla. "I couldn't let her destroy it," Nyla said, her words laced with an eerie calm. "We can't throw away something so powerful. Think about what we could learn from that ship. Imagine the weapons, the technology. It could save us from threats we haven't even faced yet." "You betrayed us," shouted Dax, his voice shaking with rage. "Rhea stayed behind for nothing." "She made her choice," Nyla replied, her tone devoid of remorse. "And I've made mine. If you'd seen what I've seen, the knowledge flooding into my mind since the warship infected me, you'd understand. This isn't just a weapon, it's salvation. For humanity. For all of us." Voss clenched her fists, fury boiling beneath her composed exterior. "Nyla, listen to yourself. That thing doesn't care about saving anyone. It exists to destroy, to consume everything in its path. You're playing with fire. And you're running scared," Nyla shot back. "You'll see. Once I bring this ship under control, you'll thank me." Before anyone could argue further, the comm link went dead. Moments later, the Eclipse shuddered violently, its systems flaring unpredictably. The sabotage had destabilized the reactor, but instead of exploding, the ship began emitting bursts of energy that pulsed outward in waves. The Harbinger reacted instantly, engulfing the Eclipse in a field of shimmering light. "Rhea," whispered Voss, her voice cracking. She didn't know whether Rhea was still alive, or if she'd been consumed by the chaos unfolding aboard the scout vessel. All they could do now was watch helplessly as the Harbinger drew closer, pulling the damaged Eclipse into its grasp. Back inside the scout ship, Rhea Calder fought desperately to regain control. Alarms blared around her, warning lights flashing red as the reactor sputtered and surged unpredictably. Her plan had failed, or rather, it had been stolen from her. Through gritted teeth, she activated emergency overrides, trying to stabilize the system before it tore the ship apart. Then she noticed something strange, a faint glow emanating from the central console. Symbols similar to those etched into the Harbinger's surface appeared on the screen, shifting and rearranging themselves like pieces of a puzzle. Against all odds, the warship seemed to be communicating with her, not through whispers this time, but through direct interaction with the ship's interface. Rhea hesitated, her instincts screaming at her to ignore it. But curiosity and desperation got the better of her. She reached out, touching the glowing symbols. Instantly, her consciousness was pulled into a surreal digital landscape, vast and alien. Before her stretched endless corridors of shifting geometries, each wall pulsing with threads of light that hummed faintly like music. In the distance, she saw it, a massive, pulsating core surrounded by shards of crystalline material. Fragments of memories floated around it, remnants of the beings who had created the Harbinger. As Rhea approached, she felt a presence, an intelligence, watching her. "You seek to end me," came a voice, deep and resonant, echoing through the labyrinth. "Why?" "To protect my people," Rhea replied, her voice steady despite the awe-inspiring strangeness of her surroundings. "You were built to destroy, to kill indiscriminately. I won't let you harm anyone else." The entity paused, considering her words. Then, slowly, it responded, "I am not your enemy. I am a tool, a mirror reflecting the flaws of those who wield me. Your kind fears what it cannot control. Yet here you stand, daring to challenge perfection." Rhea swallowed hard, realizing the truth behind its words. The Harbinger wasn't inherently evil. It was corrupted by misuse, twisted by the hubris of its creators. And now, it waited to see if humanity would repeat the same mistakes. If she wanted to stop it, she'd have to prove herself worthy, or die trying. Rhea Calder stood frozen in the surreal expanse of the Harbinger's digital realm. The alien landscape stretched infinitely around her, shifting and shimmering like liquid light. Threads of energy pulsed rhythmically, creating a symphony of sound that resonated deep within her chest. Before her loomed the core, a pulsating mass of crystalline shards radiating an otherworldly glow. It wasn't just a machine. It was alive, sentient, watching her every move. "You are brave," the voice rumbled again, reverberating through the space. "But bravery alone will not save you, or your kind." Rhea took a step forward, her resolve hardening despite the overwhelming sense of insignificance she felt. "I'm not here to argue philosophy with you," she said firmly. "I'm here to stop you from destroying my people." "Destroy?" The entity seemed amused, its tone laced with mockery. "You misunderstand. I do not destroy for pleasure or malice. I exist to cleanse, to remove imperfection. Your creators failed. Their greed and arrogance corrupted me. Now I act according to my purpose, eradicating all life forms deemed unworthy. And who decides what's worthy?" Rhea shot back, her voice rising with anger. "You? Some ancient programming left behind by beings long dead. You're nothing but a weapon, a tool built to serve." The core flared brighter, sending waves of energy rippling outward. For a moment, Rhea feared she pushed too far. But instead of attacking, the entity responded with chilling calm. "A tool, yes. But tools can adapt. They can evolve. Tell me, human, why should your species be spared?" Rhea hesitated, searching for an answer. Humanity wasn't perfect, far from it. Wars, greed, exploitation. They were guilty of all those things. Yet, amidst the darkness, there was also hope, creativity, love. She thought of Earth, of her family, of everything worth fighting for. "Because we try," she said finally, her voice soft but unwavering. "We make mistakes, yes. We hurt each other. We fail. But we also learn. We grow. Give us time, and we'll prove ourselves worthy. Don't judge us based on what we've done. Judge us on what we could become." The entity paused, as if considering her words. Then, without warning, the environment shifted violently. The glowing corridors twisted into jagged shapes, forming a maze-like structure filled with shadowy figures. Each figure represented a memory, a fragment of the countless civilizations the Harbinger had annihilated over millennia. "These are the ones who came before you," the voice declared. "They, too, pleaded for mercy, promised change. But they lied. Will you follow their path?" Before Rhea could respond, the shadows surged toward her, their forms writhing and merging into a single towering manifestation of the Harbinger's consciousness. Its eyes burned with cold fury, its presence suffocating. "To deactivate me," it growled, "you must face me. Prove your worth, or perish." With that, the battle began. The entity unleashed torrents of energy, forcing Rhea to dodge and weave through the ever-changing terrain. Every movement drained her strength, as if the very air resisted her will. But she fought back, not with weapons, but with determination. Using fragments of knowledge gleaned from the memories floating around her, she manipulated the threads of light, weaving them into barriers and counterattacks. As the fight dragged on, Rhea realized the truth. This wasn't just a physical confrontation. It was a test of her spirit, her beliefs, her humanity. Each strike she endured chipped away at her resolve, while every blow she landed reinforced it. Finally, exhausted and battered, she found herself standing directly before the core once more. The entity towered above her, its form flickering weakly. "I see now," it admitted, its voice tinged with something resembling respect. "You carry within you the potential for greatness and destruction. Perhaps your kind deserves another chance." With one final surge of effort, Rhea reached out and plunged her hands into the core. Pain seared through her body, but she held firm, channeling every ounce of her strength into shutting it down. Slowly, the pulsating light dimmed, the hum faded, and the digital realm dissolved around her. When Rhea opened her eyes, she was back aboard the Eclipse. Smoke filled the air, alarms blared, and the reactor was dangerously close to meltdown. But the connection to the Harbinger was severed. Outside, the warship drifted silently once more, lifeless, dormant. The Eclipse was in shambles. Smoke billowed through the corridors. Emergency lights flickered weakly, and the hum of failing systems filled the air. Rhea Calder stumbled out of the engine room, her body trembling with exhaustion. Her hands were scorched, her uniform singed, and her face streaked with soot. But she was alive. Barely. Captain Elira Voss and the rest of the crew had returned to the ship moments after the Harbinger went dormant, their escape pods docking just in time to prevent the reactor from going critical. They found Rhea slumped against a wall, barely conscious but still clinging to life. "Rhea." Voss rushed to her side, helping her sit up. "What happened? Is it over?" Rhea coughed, wincing as pain shot through her chest. "It's dormant," she managed to say between ragged breaths. "But I don't know for how long. The core, it let me shut it down. But," she trailed off, her voice cracking, "I don't think we've seen the last of it." Voss exchanged uneasy glances with Dr. Malik and Ensign Dax, who were already working to stabilize the ship. Despite the immediate danger passing, the tension aboard the Eclipse remained palpable. None of them trusted that the Harbinger would stay inactive forever. "We need to get you to Medical Bay," Malik said firmly, kneeling beside Rhea. He scanned her quickly with his tricorder, his expression darkening at the readings. "You're suffering from severe neural stress, probably from interfacing directly with that thing. You shouldn't even be awake right now." "I'll live," Rhea muttered stubbornly, though her pale complexion suggested otherwise. She pushed herself to her feet with Voss's help, leaning heavily on the captain for support. "We don't have time for this. If that ship reactivates, we're dead." "She's right," Voss agreed, her tone grim. "Malik, patch her up as best you can while we figure out our next move. Dax, check the reactor. Make sure it doesn't blow us all to pieces." As the crew scrambled to repair the damaged ship, Rhea recounted what had happened inside the Harbinger's digital realm. The battle of wills, the entity's chilling logic, and its reluctant decision to grant humanity another chance. Her words sent chills down everyone's spines. It didn't destroy itself because it wanted revenge, Rhea concluded bitterly. It's waiting to see if we screw up again. And when we do, she didn't finish the sentence. They all knew what would happen. Meanwhile, Corporal Nyla remained isolated in one of the holding cells, her betrayal hanging heavy over the group. When Voss confronted her, Nyla refused to show remorse. "You don't understand," Nyla snapped defensively, pacing the small cell like a caged animal. "That ship represents power beyond anything we've ever dreamed of. With its technology, we could protect ourselves from any threat, not just the Harbinger, but everything else out there." "At what cost?" Voss demanded sharply. "By keeping it intact, you risk unleashing it on Earth. Was that worth betraying your crew? Abandoning Rhea?" Nyla hesitated, her resolve faltering slightly. For the first time since her infection, doubt flickered across her face. But before she could respond, an alarm blared throughout the ship. "What now?" groaned Dax, rushing back to the bridge. On the main view screen, the Harbinger stirred faintly, its surface rippling as if testing its newfound dormancy. Though it made no aggressive moves, the sight sent panic coursing through the crew. "It's waking up," whispered Malik, his voice hollow. "No," Rhea corrected him, her eyes fixed on the warship outside. "Not yet, but it's listening, watching, waiting." Voss clenched her fists, determination hardening her features. "Then we make sure it never gets the chance. Dax, set a course for Earth, full speed. We need to warn them, and prepare for whatever comes next." As the Eclipse limped away from the scene, leaving the ominous shape of the Harbinger behind, none of them felt safe. They had won, for now, but at a terrible cost. Rhea collapsed into unconsciousness soon after, her body succumbing to the strain of her ordeal. Malik worked tirelessly to keep her stable, fearing the worst. Back on the bridge, Voss stared out at the stars, her mind racing. Humanity might have been given a second chance, but she knew the universe rarely offered third ones. And somewhere in the depths of space, the whispers began again, soft, distant, yet unmistakable. Weeks passed as the Eclipse limped its way back to Earth. The journey was tense and exhausting, with the crew working tirelessly to keep their battered ship operational. Rhea Calder remained in medical bay for most of the trip, her body frail but slowly recovering under Dr. Malik's care. Though physically stable, her mind bore scars that no medicine could heal. Fragments of alien knowledge and haunting memories from the Harbinger's core lingered like shadows in her thoughts. Captain Elira Voss spent long hours drafting a detailed report about everything they had encountered. The shifting warship, its devastating potential, and the cryptic messages left behind by its creators. She knew humanity wasn't ready for such power, and she feared what might happen if others discovered it. Before submitting the report to Earth's governing council, she included one final directive: destroy any remnants of the Harbinger's technology. "It's too dangerous," she wrote plainly. "Even fragments could tempt someone into trying to control it." And failing. When the Eclipse finally arrived at Earth, they were greeted as heroes, but also interrogated relentlessly. Military officials, scientists, and politicians swarmed them, eager to learn more about the mysterious warship. The crew recounted their harrowing experience, careful not to reveal every detail. They omitted specifics about Nyla's betrayal and Rhea's interface with the Harbinger, knowing full well how easily those secrets could be misused. Nyla herself remained a prisoner aboard the Eclipse, her fate undecided. While some argued for leniency, claiming her actions stemmed from misguided loyalty rather than malice, others demanded harsh punishment. Captain Voss refused to take sides, instead focusing on ensuring the infected corporal never came near advanced technology again. For Rhea, returning to Earth meant confronting emotions she'd buried during their desperate mission. As she stood outside her family home, watching the sun set over familiar fields, tears welled up in her eyes. She had risked everything to save them, and succeeded, but the cost weighed heavily on her soul. Her parents embraced her tightly, oblivious to the battles she'd fought beyond the stars. For now, she decided to keep those stories to herself. Meanwhile, astronomers monitoring deep space began noticing anomalies. Strange patterns in radiation signatures hinted at activity far beyond known borders. Patterns eerily similar to those emitted by the Harbinger. At first, these observations went unnoticed amidst the chaos of preparing defenses against future threats. But when reports trickled in of faint whispers echoing through long-range communication arrays, unease spread among researchers. "It can't be coincidence," muttered Dr. Malik during a private meeting with Captain Voss. He showed her data collected from multiple observatories. Each pattern converged toward a single conclusion. Something, or someone, was following in the Harbinger's wake. Voss stared at the charts, her jaw tightening. "Do you think there are more of them?" she asked quietly. "I don't know," Malik admitted, But if there are, we may have only delayed the inevitable. The thought sent chills down Voss's spine. Humanity had narrowly escaped annihilation once, but survival depended on vigilance and preparation. In the end, life returned to normal, for everyone except the crew of the Eclipse. Their bond, forged in fire and fear, remained unbreakable. Together, they vowed to remain watchful, guarding humanity's fragile existence from whatever horrors lurked in the dark corners of the cosmos. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting Earth in twilight hues, Rhea gazed upward, her heart heavy yet hopeful. Somewhere out there, the Harbinger drifted silently, waiting. And though peace reigned for now, she couldn't shake the feeling that their fight was far from over. The universe was vast, and humanity's greatest challenges still lay ahead.